Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another week with our Live with Dr. McDougall webinars. And today, as it's usually the case on every second Thursday of the month, we have our guest of honor, Dr. Doug Lisle. Dr. Doug Lisle is the psychologist for the True North Health Center and also for the 10-day live-in program both in Santa Rosa, California for Dr. McDougall. And it's always a pleasure to have what I and AJ as well, I have to quote her, we think that believe that Dr. Lisle is one of the most brilliant minds in today's world of psychology. And if there was an Oscar for psychologists, you would have to go to Dr. Lisle. So we are thrilled to have you here, Dr. Lisle. I know everybody is just can't wait to learn from you today. I just want to say, for those of you that may not be aware, that Dr. Lisle wrote this magnificent book, The Pleasure Trap. I encourage you all to get it. Also, he has this amazing website, Steam Dynamics. And I can't encourage you enough to visit the website and perhaps schedule a phone consultation with him. And I heard Dr. Lisle about 2 weeks ago in the Healthy Taste of Sacramento, and he presented a lecture that is called The Perfect Personality. And I thought it was one of the best. So of course, it's hard to say which one is the best because they're all brilliant. But this one, I hadn't heard it before. So I asked him if he would present it to us here. It's very informative and it's very fun as well. And I think we all need to know a little bit more about our personalities, and that hopefully will help us in our journey through our plant-based diets. And without any further ado, I would like to present to you all Dr. Doug Lisle. And I think, Dr. Lisle, we need you to turn on your camera. There you go. So we can see.
All right.
And very good. So let's see if I can bring you to the screen. There you go.
All right, great.
How are you doing today?
Just everything's good. All good out here.
Very good. Very good. Well, like I said earlier, thank you for making the time to be here. It really is a time of a lot of fun and learning, and we all appreciate it. So everyone, today is going to be a little different. We have been doing questions and answers. Today, Dr. Lisle is going to give you one of his inspiring presentations with his wonderful drawings. And it's a PowerPoint presentation. And I will disable the chat so that you can really listen. I want you all to get the most out of this lecture. There may be time for questions at the end, but if not, we will, when we have you back next month, Dr. Lisle, maybe we can work on questions about this lecture. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, very good. So I will put your PowerPoint presentation on the screen, and you're ready, right?
I'm ready.
Okay, so here we go. Give me a few seconds.
All right.
Okay, you do see that, right?
There we go. All right. Well, this is the story of what I call the perfect personality. And what this is about has a little bit of history to it. And that is that, many years ago, John McDougall came to us after we had done the Pleasure Trap. And he said, I think there's more to the story than what you guys did. And you've got a piece of the puzzle here about why this is difficult, but there's some things missing. And Alan, of course, rolled his eyes. And I said, well, there's a whole other part of psychology that we didn't really talk about in the Pleasure Trap. And that is that psychology is broken into two major fields of investigation. One of them is going to be what we call general psychology. That would be the equivalent in anatomy, in medicine, as Gray's Anatomy. In other words, what are all the parts and how do they all work? That's general psychology. And the Pleasure Trap was written behind thinking about general psychology. In other words, how does the pleasure mechanisms work? how do people get addicted to things, how does modern processed food get people into trouble. Those are issues that fit everybody in our species. And so, but there's a second part of psychology that's the equivalent to becoming a specialist in medicine. And that is that once you learn about how the kidney works, now you have to learn, if you want to be a kidney doctor, you need to learn about how each individual kidney works. What about the individual differences between kidneys? And in psychology, that's akin to what we're going to call personality. In other words, general psychology is the pleasure trap. Personality is about how are people different from one another that makes this problem more difficult or more easy for different people to solve. And so I decided to go on a conceptual search for the perfect personality, the person that you would if you're trying to find this person, that they would be a person that as soon as you presented them this information, they would just take this information and go with it and not have any problem. And then I wanted to look at all the reasons why it would be easy for them and difficult for the rest of us. Because most of us do not have the perfect personality to solve this problem. So we have to look at the problem of personality as an individual one of our strengths and weaknesses, and then figure out how it is that we're going to work around our weaknesses and play to our strengths. All right, so in the history of psychology, there's been a lot of theories about personality. And so there's been Sigmund Freud, and he had his thoughts about this, and if your toilet training was a little off at some point or another, then that made you, I don't know, anal retentive or anal explosive or something. Point is, he had his own ideas. Carl Jung had his ideas. And B.F. Skinner, the great Harvard professor, had his ideas. And astrologers have had their ideas. And then there's been a bunch of peons over the years, too, that have had their ideas. They wouldn't appreciate being called peons. But there's been the big thinkers and then the smaller thinkers. But it's going to turn out that they've all been wrong. Sometimes they've had little tiny pieces of the truth, but nobody up till recently has actually had this figured out. So it's going to turn out the solution wouldn't have been possible before at least the mid-20th century, because it turns out it required some very sophisticated mathematics to be developed, and that mathematics had never been developed before in history. And so then it also, because the mathematics is so complicated to perform, we really needed computers in order to solve this problem. So it wasn't until computers became widely available and psychology researchers around the world had access to computers, which really didn't happen commonly until the 1980s, did this really then emerge. And it emerged around the world in the laboratories of several different people, and it all came up with the same solution. Solution turns out to be what we're going to call the Big Five. So personality turns out to be essentially 6 ingredients. We call it the Big Five because there's a 6th ingredient, intelligence. It doesn't quite fit under the normal umbrella of personality. It's almost its own thing. So we call it the Big Five plus 1. But the other ones, the Big Five, are things that you're all going to recognize as very important ideas in the way we describe each other. It turns out that when researchers put the English language or any other language under the microscope, in the English language, the average speaker knows about 60,000 words, and 18,000 of those words have to do with these 6 concepts. So there's about 3,000 to 5,000 words that all mean these 6 words. For each one of them. So for intelligence, for example, you know several thousand words for intelligence. You just don't know that you do. But if we started, we could start talking about them. For example, dummy, genius, brilliant, bright, stupid, moron, all the average, dull. Those are all the same concept. It's all about essentially where is that person on a continuum. And so we have literally hundreds and even thousands of words for that single idea. Now, when you start to see that there are thousands of words for one idea, you start realizing how important that concept is to people. That's why Eskimos have 35 words for snow, because they're so expert in snow, and snow is so important in their environment that they can use words to give them subtle variations. And so that's what you see in the human personality. We find out that we are very subtle in the way we explain these individual differences between people to each other. You can imagine, for example, if you're talking to a friend about some guy that works on cars, you might say he's a stand-up guy, he's honest, or he's a little shifty. These are all essentially speaking to how conscientious the person is. And these are very important descriptions that we use in order to inform each other about the dealings that we have with other people and the dealings that they should look out for. So now, a big question for the ages has been, where do the big five come from? In other words, maybe do good parents make kids that are conscientious and smart and emotionally stable? Do they do that? Or does the social environment make people into, I don't know, make them very open to experience? So if you grow up in California, are you going to be kind of more wild? Is it inherited? Or is it just a mystery that we'll never figure out? It's going to turn out that at the same time that personality theorists discovered the big five, they also, a set of other researchers working independently, figured out where they come from. And so we now know it's no longer a subject of speculation. It's going to turn out that there's a great natural experiment that helped us figure this out. And this happened in Minnesota. In the state of Minnesota for years, for decades ago in the 20th century, they were keeping track of the birth of twins. I don't know why they were doing this, they just did. And so every time there was a twin birth, it was recorded in a registry. And then over the years, over the decades, a certain number of these twins were adopted out. And oftentimes one twin went to one household and one twin went to another household. And once in a while, these twins were identical twins. So now we wind up with a fantastic natural experiment to test one of the great theories in personality, which is how much is personality inherited. So now we're going to be able to see whether personality is inherited or not. Because if personality is learned, if it's simply shaped by your social environment, then it's going to turn out that if two identical twins are raised in different households, they shouldn't be alike at all. And in fact, they should probably be very much like the people that adopted them, because from birth, they're watching them and imitating them and getting reinforced by them. And so they should also be a lot like their siblings of the families that they are adopted into, because their siblings are raised in the same environment that they are. So this provides a fantastic natural experiment to test what we're going to call genes versus environment, or nature versus nurture. And so in this way, in 1985, psychologists found the answer. It's not well publicized, but this is what it is. This is what happened. Suppose we had two identical twins there. One were dressing in red and one in blue. And we're going to send one of them to Florida to live with the Smiths. And the Smiths do things their own way. He works on a boat and drinks a lot and swears and etc. And then the other one's going to go to Oregon to another family, and those people are really straight-laced and go to church 3 times a week. All right, what happens? Does our little guy in blue there wind up anything like the family that he's adopted into? The answer is no. He doesn't wind up anything like them at all. In other words, he's no more like them than a random member of the street that you could pluck off the street would be like them. So he is that kid is a total fish out of water in that house. Turns out that the very same experiment is taking place over in Oregon, where this person, the little guy, gets adopted into the straight-laced family. He doesn't become straight-laced, doesn't become anything like these people. So this is an extraordinary finding. Now we're going to find out whether or not these two individuals, the twins, are like each other when they come back together when we bring them into a room 35 years later. It's going to turn out that they are. They are extremely alike. That what we call their correlation coefficient is about 0.62, which means they are extremely similar to each other. Now, they're not the same person. They're not exactly the same, but they are extremely similar. Turns out that their intelligence is even higher, even more correlated than that. So if one of them is really smart, the other one is also going to be really smart. So this is, if one of them is average, the other one is going to be average, and if one of them is below average, the other one's going to be below average. So this tells us, essentially, this is the proof that came with this study to show us that personality is overwhelmingly dominated by nature. And so that if you're a mom and you've had 3 kids, you probably already know this intuitively, but those 3 kids are extremely different. They have similarities to each other because they share some of their genes, but they are actually quite a bit different from one another. So this is essentially the story of how we are what we are. And our personalities are not going to particularly change over the lifetime. They will a little bit. They'll modify their way along. But essentially, we are what we are. Here's me working in a maximum security state prison. And I was like that, as I always am, and they're like that, as they always were. I'd meet these guys with tattoos all over their foreheads and teeth missing from all the fights they'd been in. And there's a reason why it is that they wound up there. Obviously, sometimes good people have hard circumstances that lead them astray. But more often than not, the people that were in there for the things that they did, it wasn't an accident. All right, we're going to now look at some different features here. We're going to look at the big 5 plus 1. These come from, and we'll have some descriptions, these come from bumper stickers out of a book by Jeffrey Miller, who's a brilliant young psychologist at the University of New Mexico, who described personality in his book called Spent, where he tells the story of how our individual differences in personality essentially cause us to do the consumer spending that we do. So when people buy a Prius, there's a reason. And when people buy a Pontiac Firebird, there's a reason. What they're doing is that they are essentially expressing their personalities and their consumer choices. So it's an extraordinary book if you're ever interested. And these are some of the bumper stickers that he found driving around Albuquerque, that where people were advertising who they were by the bumper stickers on the back of their car. So talk nerdy to me. That's a bumper sticker he saw. This is a person signaling that they consider themselves high intelligence, and they're telling the world that's who they are. My boarding call is smarter than your honor student. There you go. That's somebody that's thinking about intelligence and et cetera, and just making an issue out of it. Go ahead, next slide. Don't say ironic when you mean coincidental. There you go. That's some smarty English teacher going to tell us all how to use the language. Now we're going to look at we're going to get into the big 5, and this is going to be the first one we're going to talk about is openness. And so this is a very open person here with tattoos and wild hair and who knows what substances they've been taking because their eyes look a little glazed. Yeah, my karma just ran over your dogma. There's a high openness person sort of using, if anybody ever uses the word karma, you can count on it that they're likely to be above average in openness. Question reality, there you go. The next slide. Legalized freedom. Yes, out here in the coastal California, you'll see a lot of old VW buses still driving around, 50 years later, and they're still stuck in the 1960s, and they still have these bumper stickers all over their car. So they're telling you that they are very high openness. Next slide. There you go. Reality is where the pizza delivery guy comes from. These are people expressing who it is that they are, what's on the back of their car. Go ahead, next slide. Now we're going to look at low openness, and we got a guy in a suit with a dark tie and a briefcase, and he's already signaling to us that he's very likely to be low in openness. Let's see what he says on his car. Shut up, hippie. Now there you go. My dad used to say this when I was a kid. So my dad was not very open to experience. Next slide. Live it up, sinner. My there's a reason why my dad wasn't very high in openness. My grandfather was a Methodist minister, and so he would actually say this. What part of thou shalt not don't you understand? This is right on the back of somebody's car. They're letting us know that they are low in openness. They may not know that that's what they're doing, but they are. Stereotypes make life easier. There you go. God didn't want us to eat animals. He wouldn't have made them out of meat. There you are. This is a person that's not going to be open to the concept of a vegetarian perspective because it's out of the bounds of normal. And so if someone puts that on their car, they are signaling something. They're signaling also some disagreeableness, but they're also signaling a lack of openness. All right, high conscientiousness. Now, high conscientiousness, this has to do with what you would call character, doing the right thing, etc. And so high conscientious people have a lot of anxiety to do things properly, and they lose sleep at night because they worry about making sure everything is done in the correct way. There you go. The police never thinks as funny as you do. Get off the phone and crash already. In other words, a very high conscientious person wouldn't want you on the phone. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Jesus would have used his turn signals. There, the high conscientious person is letting us know that we're not quite living up to standard. Next slide. Now, low conscientious is going to have a lack of anxiety and not very interested in making sure they do the right thing. And they're not too interested in worrying about their rent. Drive it like you stole it. Saturday as a morning. Clean house is the sign of a wasted life. These are all these signals of people without a lot of anxious tension and not necessarily concerned with doing everything properly. Now we're going to look at the next dimension is introversion and extroversion. And so the world, these people differ considerably on this dimension. Go ahead, let's look at the next slide. My cult-like following is now accepting applications. It's an extrovert. Go ahead, next. It's party time at Dana Point. You know, as a young person, I would see these bumper stickers all over Southern California, and I always wondered when, you know, there was ever going to be a party in Dana Point that I would ever be invited to, and it never happened. Go ahead, next slide. Adrenaline is my drug of choice. Now we're going to look at low extroversion, and here us introverts are headed to the library and we feel a relaxation come over us. It feels like the right place. Go ahead, next slide. Eagles don't flock. Don't bother inviting me, I won't come. I'll admit that this is not one of Jeffrey Miller's bumper stickers. I actually wrote this one myself because this is my motto. I'm really quite introverted, and so I actually don't want to be invited because I won't come. Go ahead, next slide. Now we're going to look at high agreeableness. And so there are people that are very sweet, very agreeable, and then there's people that are very disagreeable. So we're going to look at the differences here. Next slide. There you go. That's one that we've all seen. Commit random acts of kindness and senseless beauty. That's this high, agreeable, sweet person that wants the whole world to love each other. Coexist. I should have put the peace sign in there. It was supposed to be in there. We've all seen that bumper sticker. Go ahead. Next slide. God bless the whole world, no exceptions. Low agreeableness. These are people that have nothing but contradiction for you. So you have a discussion with them and everything is me. They're like the knights that say me out of Monty Python. And we can't get them to agree to anything. Go ahead, next slide. There we go. Honk if you've never seen a newsie fired from a car window. They're letting you know right now they're disagreeable and this is not going to be pleasant. Just because I'm a mom doesn't mean I care. There you go. Yes is my truck. No, I won't help you move. There you go. Go ahead, next slide. Now we're going to look at the final dimension, which is stability. This is sort of how emotional people are. And we're going to now look at the differences here in people on this dimension. Go ahead, next slide. There we go. If at first you don't succeed, redefine success. This is a very stable person that is not going to be thrown by any kind of negative feedback. It's not a problem for them. They're going to persevere. Best thing in life are not things. Very stable people, not too excited about anything, and very stable. Smile and let it go. No problem. Go ahead. Next slide. Now, low stability. These people are very emotionally volatile. So this is a whole different kettle of fish here. Some days it's just not worth gnawing through the straps. It's not whining if you wave a handgun. Tell me, where's this bright spot side you speak of? So now what we're going to look is we're going to look at profiles and perfection. So I'm now on the search with the big 5 plus 1 in my mind. And I'm going to search through the people that I know and the people that I've met. And I'm looking for the perfect personality. So here are the big 5. We're going to assume that when it comes to health behavior, you're going to have to be pretty smart in order to even caring about this. So people that are not very intelligent never are going to read enough and make the connection, or rarely will, that food and health are going to go together. So we're going to ignore the intelligence issue. We know that you have to be smart enough to know that this is serious business and that there's science that underlies health, and that it makes sense that food and health would be connected. So what we're going to be spending our time on is the big 5. So we're going to start with the cheerleader. Now, a cheerleader is going to be pretty open. She's going to be pretty conscientious because she's got to go to practice and show up and do these routines. She's going to be very extroverted. So it's not going to do us any good to have a very introverted cheerleader. She's going to be reasonably agreeable, and she's going to be a little bit emotionally unstable. Doesn't do us any good to have a cheerleader who, when the team is winning a big game, they're like, well, whatever, take it or leave it. We need to have somebody volatile, more excitable, and when they lose, there needs to be a big tear rolling down her cheek about how important this game was. So that's what a cheerleader would look like in terms of profile. All right, good. We got a football coach. That's great.
Okay, good.
So now we got the coach is not particularly open. He's pretty conventional, very conscientious. He's not particularly extroverted. It may look like they could talk in front of a camera, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of coaches' work is done behind closed doors, planning practices very carefully. Coaches are relatively disagreeable, and surprisingly enough, they're reasonably in the middle for stable. They're neither very excitable nor are they very, very stable. They have to have enough passion in there that they care when it counts. And so that's what a football coach will typically look like. Car salesman. And we're going to make it a used car salesman. Hope you don't offend anybody. Not necessarily open to experience. Not very conscientious. So a car salesman is going to be someone who can tell you something that isn't true, and it doesn't bother them that much. Now, they need to be extroverted. We can't have an introverted car salesman. And they need to be quite agreeable. So they're real friendly. So if you ask if you can get that option and what it would cost and can it be less than $300, they'll say, oh, absolutely. Now, the truth of the matter is it won't be less than $300. So that's where the agreeable and the lower conscientious are very effective at luring people into transactions. And they're going to be neither highly excitable nor are they going to be super stable. They're going to be in the middle typically in terms of emotional stability. Now we're going to look at the perfect patient. What we're going to want in terms of the perfect person that would take this information and run with it would be a person not very open to experience. Now that may surprise you. The reason why we wouldn't want somebody open to experience is we're going to want someone who is going to be able to eat a diet that is narrow, that is not as wide as the world. There's going to be no pizza, no caviar, no Coca-Cola, no bourbon. In other words, this is going to be a person who's willing to narrow down their life. And so it's the perfect patient is someone who is relatively not open. They need to be smart enough to understand what's healthy, but not that open to not looking at a diversity of experience. They're going to be very conscientious. So they're going to be someone who is determined to do things right and keep things orderly, etc. They're also going to be very introverted because it pays to not have any friends, because you wouldn't want any friends to actually invite you over and offer you any food. This would be a bit of a problem. So if you did have a few friends and you were introverted, it would be a problem if you were agreeable, because they would say, gee, would you like some cheese blintzes? And you would have to say no. But if you're agreeable, you would say yes. So it would be very useful to be very disagreeable, as well as very introverted and very essentially narrow in your life and very conscientious. And it would also pay to be very emotionally stable. So we would want to be stable, not excitable, not devastated by anything. We don't want to be medicating with our food when we're down, and we don't want to be celebrating with food. Food is fuel. That's all it is. We eat the brown rice and broccoli every day, and that's the personality that would be the perfect patient to take this information. So we're going to look quickly at one of my very good friends, Wild Larry, who is a rock drummer in his early life, and we're going to look at him and we're going to see whether he's the perfect patient. Turns out Larry's very open to experience. So he grew up in the 1960s and 70s, and he did a great number of illegal drugs. Some miracle that he's still functioning. Interestingly enough, he's a very high conscientiousness. So you can be very open and also be very high conscientious. So people that are very open and very high conscientious do wacky things, but they manage to survive. So if you think about someone who climbs Mount Everest, they have to be very open to experience and very conscientious, or you could not pull that off. Wild Larry's extroverted, very much that way. He's a little disagreeable, so he'll argue with people, but he's not that disagreeable, and he's a little unstable. So, he's very excitable, and then he also gets down. So it's going to turn out he's not the perfect patient, because it's hard for him to keep his diet narrow. He likes to experience new things when he travels. When he went to New Orleans, he had to have, I don't know, catfish or whatever it is that they have down there. So even though he says he's a vegan, his exploratory instincts get the better of him. And then also, when he gets down, he needs a little soy ice cream to medicate. And then when he gets all excited, he needs a little soy ice cream to celebrate. So Wild Larry has some weaknesses in his profile. He is a perfect Wild Larry. His wife loves him just the way he is. But for a patient for this problem, he's not the perfect personality, and therefore he does a good job, but he doesn't do a great job. Let's see if we can figure out who this is. This is Dr. McDougall. So Dr. McDougall is a bit open, not super open. He's not as open as Wild Larry. But Dr. McDougall, swims with the sharks and goes to the Galapagos and learned to, fly a plane. This is not someone who is not open. And so part of that openness drove him to the new information. So the open-mindedness as well as the adventurousness, that helped him become who it is that he is. Super conscientious. It's known by many people that he will answer your email before you have sent it to him. So we know he's very conscientious. He's neither introverted nor extroverted. He's in the middle. He's very in the normal ranges for interpersonal style. He's a little disagreeable, and this is true with most pioneers. They put up with a lot of negative feedback from their peers, and it helps a great deal to have some cussedness in you to push back. He's not super disagreeable, but he's disagreeable enough to stand his ground. And so that's actually a strength with respect to this problem. And he's quite stable. So Dr. McDougall does not need to celebrate and medicate as much as my friend Larry does. So where we see Dr. McDougall's weaknesses here would be in his openness. And so this is where it is a little sense of adventure will pull him a little bit away from a perfect diet and lifestyle. Not much, obviously, and he's overriding these things with great intelligence and great conscientiousness. but it has not been as easy as it would be if you were lower in openness. Now we're going to look at Mary McDougall, and we're going to see about that. Mary is also high in openness, high in conscientiousness, also middle of the road, actually probably a little bit more introverted than John. She's very agreeable and very stable. So it's going to turn out that Mary had no problem adopting this diet and lifestyle for the reasons that because she was going to follow John's lead and wasn't going to fight it. I've seen many couples where one person in the couple was going to go this direction and the other person in the couple was disagreeable enough they weren't going to go. So fortunately, he would have not become Dr. McDougall had he not been married to Mary, or marries someone like Mary, because he needed somebody who was willing to go along with really a revolutionary way of looking at life in this way. And she did, and that's how this worked out. Oh, I had a sweetheart once, and she was kind of wild, so we could see the very high openness. So I found about this openness in the early 2000s when I discovered that she had discovered a thing called Burning Man. When I told this story at Advanced Study Weekend, I said, "You guys, have you heard of Burning Man?" And everybody in the audience seemed like they'd heard of it. It's like, where have I been? I never heard of it. But high open people have all heard about Burning Man. And so not only did she hear about it, of course, she wanted to go. And I said, that looks to me like a bunch of hippies howling at the moon, eating food with sand in it. And she said, yeah, isn't that great? So she went, and she came home a week later, dust all over her and in her ears. And I said, how was it? She said, well, it was a bunch of hippies howling at the moon and eating food with sand in it. I said, was it worth it? She says, yeah, never do it again, but it was worth it. That's the high openness. Conscientious, pretty conscientious. She was very extroverted, pretty agreeable, and more like a cheerleader, a little less stable. And so as a result, pretty excitable. And so through this, when you see this profile, this is someone who's adventurous and going to want to eat the crawdads in New Orleans, and also going to do a little celebrating and medicating with food, and going to hang out with people. And when they offer her food, she's going to eat it. There you go. You're not going to have this has not been an easy ride for this person. This person does a good job to this day, but not a great job, which is exactly what we would expect out of this personality. Now we're going to look at my best friend, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and the co-author of The Pleasure Trap. Let's see. Low openness. Alan could eat the same thing every day, and it wouldn't bother him in the slightest. Brown rice and broccoli again. He's all excited about this, no problem. He fits the profile for low openness. He's very conscientious. So this also is now fitting. In other words, once he finds out the thing he's supposed to do, this is what he's going to do. He's not extroverted. He's very introverted, and so this is perfect. You can certainly talk to him. He's not shy. He's just reclusive. He lives in a remote area of our place in Santa Rosa, and he's very happy to be back into a deep flag lot where people don't even know he's there. He's disagreeable, similar to Dr. McDougall. In other words, he's not super disagreeable, but he's disagreeable enough. So if anyone ever did ask him, hey, Alan, would you like a bite of this? He'd say no. And if they said, well, why not? He'd say, because I don't want to get sick and die. And he would be very comfortable making everybody else uncomfortable about these issues. And finally, Alan is very stable. So there's no need for him to celebrate or medicate about his food. He eats the same thing day in, day out, and doesn't have a problem. So we're going to look quickly now at the issue of the strengths and weaknesses that come with us not being a perfect personality. Because in all my travels and all the people I've met, I've only met one perfect personality, and it turned out to be Alan Goldhammer. He has the perfect personality for executing health behavior. He doesn't have the perfect personality if you want to come up with a movie in Hollywood, because they're not going to be that open. He's not going to be that creative. He's not the person that you want being the DJ at your party, because he's not extroverted. He's not perfect for anything other than this. And this he is perfect for, which is why it is that he grabbed this information as a young man and had no problem. So we're going to look at ourselves here. And we're going to look at the big five with respect to strengths and weaknesses. If you are a person that's open, you are going to be a novelty seeker. And so we're going to need to do things to help that novelty seeking, which means you're going to have to do more work than the average McDougaller, because you're going to have more recipes, more things under your fingers that you know how to create in order to make sure there's enough repertoire in your food and enough variety that you don't get bored. If you're not that conscientious, then you may need to get help. Hire your kid, hire the neighbor's girl. You may have to have somebody help you get organized in the kitchen and even do some of the cooking for you. For most of you, that won't be an issue. Most people that are even anywhere near this thing are pretty conscientious. But paying attention to getting things organized, that can be very important. Extroversion. If it turns out that you are both extroverted and you are agreeable, then this is a bit of a problem, because people are going to be offering you food and you're going to be in a lot of social situations and you're going to be uncomfortable with doing things differently than other people. So this is where we look at my video called Getting Along Without Going Along, and we make sure we got the lines down for the scene strategy. So we are very smooth at diffusing the subtle cross-examination and social pressure that goes on there. Alan didn't need this. Neither did Dr. McDougall. Dr. McDougall never listens to that lecture. He doesn't like that lecture because it doesn't fit him at all. He wants people to just get in everybody's face and tell them off. But we're not going to do that. If you're a more agreeable person, we need to have some strategies to make this smooth, and that's the way out of the social pressure. And finally, if you are someone that likes to celebrate or medicate with your food, then you're going to need to have healthy treats that you know how to make and have those ingredients available. And so this is where we have to turn to some Mary's Desserts or Chef AJ's Desserts. We have to have some ways to celebrate that are fun and still health promoting. So, oh yes, so this is the story of myself and Alan, that when we had gone and done a speech on the pleasure trap, and we were coming home, and his wife Jennifer told us that we were too late to get home for dinner, that she wasn't going to fix it for us. So we needed to go to a nearby cafe. We needed to find food for ourselves. And there's a place called the Redwood Cafe that I had been going to for several months, and I would every now and then order the carrot cake. And so I was sort of the carrot cake guy. I would always order a vegan wrap, and I would order the carrot cake, and I'd scrape off the cream cheese frosting because I don't like dairy because it'll clog out my sinuses. So I would have this carrot cake every now and then. So I go in there with Alan, because Alan said, let's go to the Redwood Cafe. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, let's hope that they don't say anything about this. So I go right up to the gal at the counter, and I said, okay, I'm just going to have a vegan wrap. And she said, and a piece of carrot cake? Just exactly what I didn't want her to do. And I said, no, just the vegan wrap. And she said, are you sure? So this is the moment when my face turned about 110 degrees and red, and Alan never said a word. Alan being stable Alan and disagreeable Alan, that all I thought was, someday I'm going to tell a story and somebody's going to appreciate this because I'm in some misery right here. I think that that could be it. Yes. So the story here, folks, is that none of us have the perfect personality to solve this problem. Almost none of us. And so that whatever your strengths and weaknesses are, you can use this as a guide to sort of direct you and to point you towards the places where you've got some weaknesses. And these are ways to patch away around those weaknesses so that you can do a better job and so that you can stay on track and have the life you deserve.
Thank you so much. This is my second time I heard you, and I was laughing like it was the first time. But thank you. It's so insightful to see all those 5 categories and start to think about where you fit in.
Sure.
Just one question,
Sure.
Doug Lisle. I apologize, everybody. Today we had to do the webinar an hour earlier because I have a very tight schedule and I'm going to have to go. But I encourage you to write down questions while they're fresh in your mind right now, so that when we do our next webinar, you'll have the questions about today's lecture. I don't know if I will be able to find the question that someone, let's see. What do you do if your personality is not suited to this lifestyle, but you're intelligent and you know this is how you should eat?
Yeah, you have to do all these patches. These are like software patches. You know how Google and Apple are always having, Microsoft always have to send up updates because there's some problem with their software. If you don't have the perfect personality, you've got the perfect personality to be you, but you don't have the perfect personality for this problem. So in some ways, the perfect personality for this problem is some really boring accountant that just does everything properly and makes sure every number is in the right slot and never gets too excited or upset about anything. And so most of us don't have that. So we have to do things like widening our repertoire, sometimes putting in some real effort, bursts of energy at organization. So make sure that you've got all the equipment and the recipes and stuff stocked in your pantry to make, to have 80% of the job done before you start. These are some of the things that we need to do. And if you're real agreeable, then you're going to need to look at my video on getting along without going on, so that you've got a few words and phrases and strategies that can slide around the social pressures that come up. So that's how we have to do it. We have to patch our way around it.
Is this information that you presented today, is it in the book or it's not in?
This is not in the Pleasure Trap. So this is what happened when Dr. McDougall said, you guys don't have the whole story. And so that's what came out. And Alan, of course, said, what do you mean we don't have the whole story?
Right. That's right.
Dr. McDougall was right on target, and this has become a favorite. When people hear this, they can see themselves and they can see their own. They can see where they're vulnerable, and so my great openness led me to the character.
Thank you, Dr. Lisle, for being here today, and thank you everybody for joining us. And remember that next week we are continuing with Dr. McDougall's series on the digestive tune-up. And every time that you sign up, we send you homework so that you can read and be ready and get the most out of the webinar. So we will see you next week. Now, next week it will be at the usual time of 1 p.m. Central Time or 11 a.m. Pacific Time. Thank you again, and we'll see you in a few weeks then, hopefully.
Fantastic, Gustavo.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great weekend.